this video, I'm going to teach you how to play the chuck on the ukulele. But before we dive into any specifics, it's important to know what a chuck exactly is. To put it very simple, a chuck is a technique where you strum the strings while muting them with your strumming hand, creating a percussive chuck sound instead of a ringing note. But there's a catch, and this is what a lot of videos won't tell you, because when I do the chuck, I don't hit the wood of the ukulele at all. And while it is true that the chuck is about muting the strings to a complete stop, you don't do just that. I use the sound of dead strings to create a percussive effect. Allow me to demonstrate. Okay, so let me show you the difference between a normal mute and a chuck. So with a normal mute, I simply just play the strings and then I literally place my hand on top of the strings, muting the sound immediately like this. There was sound and now there's no sound. But with the chuck, there was sound, then you hear the dead string sound, and then I mute it with my hand. If you want to replicate the dead string effect, simply put your fingers on the strings, don't press the frets, and then hit all the strings. This is a sound you might hate when you start playing the ukulele, but now we're going to use it to our advantage. And this brings me to the part of the video where I show you how to play the chuck effectively. But before we do that, I need you to hit that subscribe button on my channel. I upload daily ukulele tutorials on how you can become a better ukulele player. In addition to that, I also upload my self-composed fingerstyle ukulele arrangements of popular songs. Once you've subscribed to my channel, let's move on to the next part where I will show you how to play the chuck in the most efficient way. The first thing you need to make sure that you're doing when you're performing the chuck is that you have a relaxed strumming hand. Even though I just told you that the chuck is a percussive technique, you don't like slam your hand into the strings. It doesn't work like that. Actually, the more calm your wrist is, the better your chuck will be. So please make sure to loosen your wrist a little bit up just by shaking it like this before you perform the technique. The second thing that you need to know before you even start playing the chuck is that you need to understand the different motions that your playing hand goes through while performing this technique. So we're gonna practice this in steps. Step 1, do a downstroke. Step 2, twist your wrist just by a little bit and put the inner part of your thumb against the strings. If your nail bed hits the strings and it hurts, then it means that your wrist is too much inverted. So make sure of that while deciding your angle. Step 3, ensure that you're muting all the strings with your thumb. Let's try this a couple times together. 1, 2, 3. So when I say 3, you're just checking your thumb if it's covering all the strings. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Now you're going to do a downstroke, but as soon as the strings start to make a sound, you mute them with your thumb, like this. So you're actually playing the strings, but then you're muting them directly to create that dead string effect. So now we're going to do it string by string. So with your palm lightly resting on the strings, strum down. Instead of a ringing sound, you should hear a chuck or a thud sound. So let's do it slowly and then speed it up. Now let's do it with all strings. Like that. So far in this video, we have practiced a downstroke and then a chuck together. But it's important to know that after a chuck, you always do an upstroke like this. I'm saying this because this is crucial when you want to incorporate the chuck in the strumming pattern. But no worries, I'm going to explain to you how you can do this effectively in the best way possible. So the best way to do an upstroke is to strum upwards with a bow like this. To make it easier to practice and remember, make sure to always visualize it as a capital letter D, because you strum downwards with a straight line and then you strum up with the bow like that. This also applies to the chuck, because if you do a chuck and then you've done it, then you strum upwards with a bow like that as well. If you'd like to see this technique fully broken down, I'm going to link a video right now where I show you how to strum, how to do the island strum. So if your strums don't sound good, make sure to watch that video, come back and resume with learning the chuck. So now we have all this information, let's incorporate the chuck in not one, but two strumming patterns. But before we do that, I need to tell you one super important thing. The chuck is not an add-on to strumming patterns, but it replaces certain strums in your strumming pattern. So allow me to demonstrate what I mean. If I take the classic island strum as an example, and I would put the chuck on top of it, it would sound like this. It's a whole mess, so we don't want that. But if I incorporate the chuck the correct way, it sounds like this. So the chuck comes on the second downstroke and on the semi-last one. I've put a visualizer on screen so you can see exactly which strums in the classic island strumming pattern are replaced. So what we can conclude from this whole story is that the chuck replaces certain strums and is not an add-on. So let's replace them right now and learn this strumming pattern together. When practicing a new strumming pattern, it's always best to divide them in two parts. So part 1 goes like this. Down, chuck, up. Again. Down, chuck, up. Then comes part 2. Up, chuck, up. Again. Up, chuck, up. Now we're gonna glue together. So it's gonna be down, chuck, up, chuck, up. Again. When you're learning a new strumming pattern, doesn't matter if it has a chuck in it or not, always make sure that you're practicing with one loop at a time. Leave a gap between the loops and then slowly close the gap as you progress and register the new strumming pattern in your muscle memory. The final result is this. Once you got that down, let's learn the second strumming pattern, and something really interesting happens there. When I play the island strum like this, you hear a silent part, right? This is where we're going to insert the chuck now. The total thing sounds like this. Let's learn it right now. And also with this strumming pattern, we're gonna learn it by breaking it down in smaller steps. Part 1 goes like this. Down, down, up, chuck. Again. Down, down, up, chuck. And now without me talking. Alright, now comes part 2. Up, down, up. So there's no chuck in this part. Now we're gonna glue together. Down, down, up, chuck, up, down, up. Again. Down, down, up, chuck, up, down, up. And now without me talking. Again, leave a gap between the two loops and then glue together. So like this. Gap. You don't need to say gap every single time out loud, but it's just to show you where the gap is. So now you've learned a really cool technique and also how to apply it. But we are not done yet. Because when you're practicing this technique on your own without me and your chuck doesn't sound as good, you need to make sure that the 5 essential things that I'm going to tell you right now are in check. Number 1, if the strings are still ringing while you're doing the chuck, make sure that your thumb is really covering all the strings. So not like this, but really make sure that the thumb is like laying on the strings like that. And if adjusting the angle doesn't work, try just adding a little bit more pressure to your playing. The ukulele won't break, but don't slam it though. Tip number 2, and this one might surprise you, but if your strumming and your chucking feels very awkward, then you are on the right path. Because your body is learning and is registering everything you've just learned in this video. Take breaks while practicing, don't get frustrated, be patient, be calm. I can guarantee you that your muscles will improve its memory. The third tip to get a good chuck sound, and I've already said this before, but please make sure that your wrist is loose before you even start chucking. Because if you tense up right before doing the chuck, your fingers will get stuck in the strings, your nail bed might hit the strings, and it will just sound horrible and hurt a lot. So make sure to loosen your wrist a little bit as if you've just written a long piece of text and you're like done and your hand is paining. Shake like that. You're like, oh, it hurts, you know? This is what you need to do. Also make sure to take breaks because your wrist does need to loosen up a little bit when you're doing a chuck like the whole time. Number 4, adjust the angle. So what I mean by that is the following. If you do a chuck like this, make sure to not bend off like that, but keep your index finger and your thumb close to the A string. Why? Because you immediately have to do an upstroke straight after, remember? So if I do this, and I have to do an upstroke, then you will overcompensate by doing that and it will hurt a lot and you'll probably only hit the A string. The 5th and last tip that I'm giving you to play the chuck in a beautiful way is to make sure that you're experimenting with different rhythms and different flows. You always need to practice slow before speeding it up. And you can easily do this by tapping your foot or by using a metronome. And if you don't have a metronome, have no fear. Because did you know that if you search for a metronome on Google, you will get an online metronome immediately that you can adjust to your liking. It's pretty crazy if you think about it, how much there's actually online these days. Now you know how to chuck effectively on the ukulele, but if you want to get a head start at fingerpicking on the ukulele as well, I'm gonna link a video on the screen right now. Make sure to click through and watch it and just learn a bunch of stuff today. And I hope to see you soon in the next video.